guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing super well. Okay guys, we are going to talk about this case on Charles Cullen. There's a documentary on Netflix out about him called Capturing the Killer Nurse. It was weird. I know that he took people's lives, but it's almost as if, with the way that he tells it, he was relieving people from their pain. But he was causing pain and suffering, and this man should have never been anywhere near a hospital. Just some really bad stuff happened with this man, and we're gonna get into it. If you're new here, I'm DESxASMR, and basically you'll find on my channel true crime content like this, vlogs, whisper rambles. So if you like what you see, you get some tingles, don't forget to subscribe. Okay guys, so before I really get into this documentary, I want to get into the background of Charles Cullen and really understand what his childhood was like and how that shaped him, and not only his childhood but also his early adult years, because this guy just seemed to kind of have a tragic life throughout, and it is absolutely no excuse for what he did, but let's try to see what was going on. Here we go. Okay, so Charles Cullen was born February 22nd, 1960 in West Orange, New Jersey. He was raised in a working-class Catholic family, and he was the youngest of 8 children. So his father, Edmund, was a bus driver, and he actually died September 17th, 1960, so he didn't know his father. He was only 7 months old. Now Charles would later describe his childhood as incredibly miserable, and he was constantly bullied by his classmates and his older sister's boyfriends. When he was 9 years old, it was his first attempt at taking his own life, which 9, he would drink chemicals from chemical sets to try to do this. Now, his mother, Frances, she was born in England and moved to the States after World War II as a war bride, and sadly she did die in a car accident when Charles was 17 years old. And not only was her death tragic to him, but what happened after. It seemed that the hospital, they had her body and they just cremated her. I'm not sure what the heck was happening in that time for the hospital to just do something like this, or what the circumstances were. I mean, maybe just the kids didn't know what to do, so the hospital just took care of it. I don't know, but this was really, really hard on Charles. Now, the following year after his mom died, he graduated high school and he enlisted in the U.S. Navy, and he served aboard the submarine USS Woodrow Wilson. And so he was on board. He was a part of the team that operated the vessel's Poseidon missiles, but he didn't fit in at all when he was in the Navy, with the other guys. And again, he faced bullying and even hazing while he was in the Navy. And 1 year into his service, there not at all his uniform, and he was disciplined for this, but could never give an explanation as to why he was dressed in scrubs, a surgical mask, and gloves. And eventually he was dismissed, even though he did pass certain psychological exams. He was released on medical discharge from the Navy in 1984 for unspecified reasons. Now, shortly after being let go by the Navy, Charles enrolled in nursing school in Jersey, and he was actually elected president of his class, and he graduated in '86 and started to work in the burn unit at St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston, New Jersey. Now, Charles did meet someone, and the two got married in 1987, and he had a daughter, or he had two daughters, about 1 year apart. However, Charles's wife started to notice some really strange behavior, disturbing behavior. He would abuse their dogs, mistreat them. He seemed to burn his daughter's books. Left his daughters with the babysitter for an entire week, and she was afraid that he would actually endanger their kids. But Charles denied these claims and said that his wife was exaggerating. However, the wife did end up, divorcing him and claiming that something was very wrong and that he was mentally ill. So, knowing that, I'm not just going to read through this entire thing. I want to talk about the documentary and everything. So, it seemed that when he was working at one of the hospitals, there was this patient, the first patient that was really talked about, and he was a priest. And he's someone that really influenced a lot of people's lives, in doing what he did. Now, he was staying at this hospital, and Charles was looking after him. He was his nurse. And in Charles's mind, he looked at this priest and saw him laying there and thought that he would just wanted to end his suffering, that, he was sick and just wanted to kind of help him along. So, Charles injected him with digoxin. Now, digoxin is a heart medication, and it can be used to help improve the heart rate. However, Charles overdosed the priest on digoxin, and I believe it causes heart rate to just slow down to eventually going into cardiac arrest, and he died. Now, this wasn't immediately found out. It just seemed that he was okay 1 second and not okay. And the strange thing about this priest is that in Charles's mind, he was helping him to kind of put him out of his suffering. But literally everybody says on the staff, everybody says this guy was actually about to be ready to be released. He had improved so much for the reason that he was initially there. He was healthy, he was fine, there's absolutely no reason that he should have died. He was being monitored and was in good health, and Charles just took him out. Now, before I go any further onto the actual patients, I'm gonna go back to his personal life a little bit, because this was, when we start to see his behavior, something's really wrong with him mentally. So, after his divorce, Charles moved into a basement apartment in Phillipsburg, and he later So, in March of 1993, he actually ended up breaking into a coworker's home while she and her young son were sleeping, and he didn't do anything to them, but he did creep out without waking them up. And he actually began to stalk this coworker, which is so scary, and she had to file a police report against him, and he pleaded guilty to trespassing and received 1 year of probation. And the day after his arrest, he made another attempt to take his life. So he took 2 months off of work for, this depression. And he was in 2 different psychiatric facilities. And he actually attempted again 2 more times to take his life. Now, this is when he goes back to work. And mind you, he's worked at a couple different hospitals. And through this, I did another video on Dr. Death, where this surgeon was just wild. Go check out the video. Dr. Death is what it's called. My question is when these people in the medical profession start to have a lot of people under their care die, seemingly with no real good reason, why aren't they brought up to the board or questioned? There's an investigation looking into chemicals that could possibly be in the person's body. What's the line connecting these people? That seems obvious. But one thing that was pointed out was that for hospitals, it seemed in this guy's case that it would just be too much, and they would rather just let him go rather than do an internal investigation and start an entire process. They just quietly let him go and move on to the next hospital. It's insane. Now, so Charles started to work at this hospital, and there was a nurse there as well. And this nurse, she had a problem with her heart and her heart rate, and she had some kind of an issue that could actually be life-threatening. But while working at the hospital, she was getting, good medical insurance and able to take care of her family. And typically, if her job found out about this health condition, she wouldn't be able to work, and that just wasn't an option for her, which is so sad and messed up. So anyways, one day at work, her heart rate kind of shot up. I believe she said it was about 180, and she was like, oh my goodness. And she felt like she was about to pass out, and Charles saw her and was like, what's wrong? And so she told him, and she risked telling him this information because if he told the boss or anybody else, it could have cost her a job. But she just let him know what's going on, and he handed her this medication, and she didn't question the medication, how he got it, but she knew that it could help her, so she took the medication. And he ended up covering her patients and took care of everything, the charts, and just got her work done for her while she rested, and really took care of her. And it was like, wow. And they actually had a really close friendship. I think because of that too, because that wasn't the only time. It was the first time, but not the only time, that he covered her back and got her work done for her in times of, when she needed the help. And he didn't tell anybody about her condition, so he seemed like a really solid dude, really good friend. And she felt something for him because she looked at him as somebody who did experience bullying, and she felt bad for him. And not like pity friendship, but she really developed a real friendship with him. So she trusted him. He seemed like a really good, trustworthy guy that just went through some difficult things in life. Now, Charles, with his patients, and he worked for over a span, I believe, of 16 years, something like this, as a nurse. And over the span of years, I think he had up to 400 victims, really. was in the hospital doing a procedure, and she was just in recovery, about to get ready to be transferred to rehabilitation so that she could go home. And anyways, before she was transferred to rehabilitation, she was laying there in her bed, and her son was next to her, just being with her. And then there walks in a male nurse, and he requests that her son leave the room. So he leaves the room, he goes to the nurse's station, and he hears his mom yell out, "Ouch!" And so he rushes back into the room. The male nurse leaves, which is Charles, and he said, "What happened?" And she's saying that he stuck me with a needle. And so he takes out his pocket knife, which has a magnifying glass, and looks, and in her thigh he sees that there is a prick mark. And anyways, she gets released and is in transit to go to the rehabilitation center. And he goes home, maybe to change his clothes or just to go home really quick, but he's about to go and meet his mom again. And he gets a call, and this is in such a short period of time, that his mom died. And he's like, "What?" And he knew that this was somebody that took her life. And he went to the prosecutor's office to report a crime. Now the thing was that there was suspicion raised about Charles, but there was no evidence that he actually did anything to take anybody's life. And there were toxicology tests that were given to his mom. They tested her for every drug except digoxin. If they had tested for that, they would have seen that there was an overdose and could have gotten Charles, but they didn't test for this one drug, and he got away with it. And after that, he checked himself into a psychiatric facility, and again, he really wanted to stop nursing. He didn't want to be in this environment anymore. But there was a report written that while he had a bit of trouble, there's no reason why he can't go back to work. And of course, he had to go back. Like I said, he had to pay child support. He was accused of being a deadbeat father, so he was forced to do this. And he said that he didn't know how to describe what he was feeling or what he was doing. It's just he knew that if he was gonna be in this environment, he just wanted to end the suffering, which I think has some connection to his own personal suffering that he just wanted to end but couldn't. This man tried to take his life so many times since childhood into his adulthood. Even after this, he was at home and tried to take himself out with carbon monoxide poisoning, and the neighbors saw that, smelled, or there was the alarm that was going off, something that alerted them and stopped it. So I think that because he couldn't take himself out with his suffering, he projected that onto others who were not really suffering. They were about to be released and in good health, and took them out instead. So there was this other nurse woman who had a very sweet connection with some of her patients, and she felt that Charles targeted two of her patients, and one of them was just this big, strong guy that just brought such light to the environment, even though he was kind of weak in speaking, and he kind of grumbled out, "I love you," and was singing "You Are My Sunshine," just the sweetest man. And this was a target for Charles. And this nurse said that, she was taking care of him, he was okay. But she found out that when she wasn't on duty and Charles was, he coded. And she didn't expect that. She knew something went wrong, and not just him, but her other patient as well. And she did look into the medical records and stuff, and saw something on Charles, and saw that he had 40 deaths happen when he was on duty, which was double the amount that was just statistically possible within a year's time frame of deaths happening under a nurse. And she said, "I know that he is taking people's lives here, deaths, once you investigate one and it's proven that it's because of your nurse over a course of I don't know how long that this person died, now you have to investigate every single one of these deaths that happened when he was around. And do you know how much they would be sued? It would shut them down. And this is ultimately what led his employers to protect him, sweep it under the rug, act like nothing was going on, and either let him go or continue in his business as usual, which is absolutely disgusting, morally wrong. And imagine that news gets out that there are so many deaths happening in a somewhat short period of time. Nobody's gonna want to go there, so you're losing money on every front. And it's sad that it's about money, not about people's lives. That's a whole other conversation, but this is what was happening. And then the other nurse, who was Charles's really good friend, she was at the nurse's station, and these are just a few cases in what quite possibly is, like I said, hundreds. She was at the nurse's station, and there was this one patient who went into VTAC, and it was cold blue, and so she ran into the room, and Charles was already there, and he was administering a medication into the guy's IV, and she asked him, "What is that?" And he said, "Lidocaine." And she thought for a second, why is he giving this patient lidocaine? Anyways, they were doing CPR and trying to, bring the patient back, and then the resident comes in, and he's saying what medication was given to this patient. And because this nurse, who was Charles's friend, is the lead nurse on the shift that night, she took responsibility and said, "I administered this patient lidocaine," although she wasn't the one that did it. She walked in on Charles doing it, but she took responsibility for her staff. And the resident looked at her and said, "This patient is allergic to lidocaine." So, skipping forward, basically, all eyes are on Charles now, but the thing with medical homicide is that it's very difficult to prove that someone is unaliving patients if they're not knowing what drug to look for. It's very hard to prove, and it takes a lot of time, but the police were, they were already notified. There was already an investigation going on, people trying to look into Charles's background and his patient history to try to pin this guy down, because his friend at the hospital and other nurses had already reported that there is something very, very wrong with this nurse and with our patients that are dying, and something needs to be done about this. So basically, the friend of Charles, ex-friend, starts to work with the investigation unit, and they say, "We just need a confession. We need a confession," because at this point they did find out about the DESxASMR, but they really needed a confession to pin him down. And so she called him up and asked if they could go for some tea or dinner or something like this. And so he said, "Okay, I'm free, let's do it." And so they sat down, and she was talking to him like normal, and she said, "Hey, listen, what happened with that priest?" Basically, she kind of let on that she knows that you're doing something wrong, and I want you to be very honest with me, because right now I'm in a very difficult situation. I'm the lead of the nursing unit, and if you don't tell me what really happened, what you did, that I may not be aware of, then I may be in trouble. And this And so he did actually end up admitting that I am the one that injected DESxASMR to cause that patient to go into cardiac arrest and ultimately end his life. But it was strange because there was a switch that happened between the time that he actually admitted that he did it and when she was trying to get him to get a confession. And she said that when she really hit the head on the nail here, that I know what you did, I just need you to tell me specifically what it was. It's like she wasn't talking to her friend anymore. It's like there was just this emptiness, not an evilness, but an emptiness that she never saw before in him. Something had switched. Basically, he admits what he did with the priest, and so as they're getting ready to leave, the police get him and they bring him into the station and where they do questioning. And the other nurse that was with him, sitting with him, getting him to do the confession, was in the room when he was talking to the police. And it's when he admitted something that shook her world entirely. And it's not only did he administer these deadly drugs and medications to these patients directly himself, but he also contaminated the IV bags that all the other nurses would take to hook up to patients. And he put deadly drugs in them, and she was one of the nurses, probably out of, the other nurses as well, had the same thing, administering these deadly drugs unknowingly to their patients. So it's like not only do you commit this horrible crime, but you also involve other people in taking these innocent people's lives. Can you imagine the crushing feeling that you are unknowingly a part of this guy's evil acts? What it does to you psychologically, it's just horrible. And another nurse mentioned that there was a drug that he used, that this is a miserable death, where once taken, you're aware in your body, but you cannot move, you cannot speak, you cannot breathe. Nobody would know that you need help. You can't even blink, really. And you're dying in your aware body. That's torture. I just, the people at the top that had these warnings, that these red flags, were presented to them, that chose to ignore because they were afraid of being sued or not having, patients come in or losing money. I hope that they're in jail just like him. They should not be in any position of power because morally corrupt. Come on. And who knows, this can still be happening right now today. And there's no action being taken. He's not the first person in medicine to take patients' lives. I've done 2 other videos on this, and there's more. What is going on?
You pled guilty to murder.
I think that I had a lot of trouble accepting that word for a long time. I accept that that's what it is.
Do you consider yourself a serial killer?
I guess it depends upon a person's definition. If it's more than one and it's a pattern, I guess, then yes. My goal here isn't to justify, what I did. There is no justification. I just think that the only thing I can say is that I felt overwhelmed at the time.
It's devastating. He's in jail for life, as he should be. And this is just bad all around. And they actually brought back up the priest's body, the first person's body, and really got the proof of the DESxASMR. And because of